Welcome to the wonderful world of Hooky. I'm Chris and I'm going to teach you how to play the game. But first, a word on the backstory. This game is a combination of a word and deduction game, and it was designed by James Miller, who was a much loved member of the board game community. Sadly, he passed away quite early in 2020, but before he did, he said that he wanted us to finish the game and he wanted it to be used for Friends of Aseema, a nonprofit in the U.S. that supports the Aseema Charitable Trust of Mumbai, India. Aseema in India provides education and medical care to some of the most marginalized children in the world, and that's how the game came to have a school setting. So what's your job in the game? Well, you will play a homeroom teacher, and you've heard the rumor that there are 3 children today who are going to be skipping school and off playing hooky, and you need to figure out who they are. It's not so easy at school in the morning when things are chaotic and kids are coming in late off the playground. So you have a tough task before you. The game plays for 3 to 5 players and lasts for 6 rounds, no matter how many people are playing. The game should take an hour, hour and a half, depending on how fast or slow your players are. And now, let me tell you a little bit about the components and how to set up the game. First of all, the core of the game is this deck of cards. The deck of cards has the letters of the alphabet from A to Z and a child's name. So these are the children represented on the cards. So what you're going to do, you're going to start off by shuffling these and then secretly placing 3 of them aside, and that's the hooky pile. Those are the 3 students that are off playing hooky. Nobody should be able to see those cards. Then you're going to take the cards that remain, you're going to deal them out evenly to all the players. So if there were 4 players, I'm just going to be dealing them out until I get to 5. Then there's going to be 3 left over. The 3 left over get put right here, and that's called the playground, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So let me clear these away so it's easier to follow along. So we'll say that I was dealt these 5 cards. Okay. Now, I'm going to get a worksheet. Looks like this. And I'm going to get a really nice player aid, a screen, nice big screen, that's going to go around my sheet. And I'm going to be able to take notes on there in a way that nobody else can see. And on the screen, there's a lot of information to help remind you of the rules and how the game scores. Then I'm going to move that away now so we can see as well. So I've got my hand of cards. Now I have them all spread out like this, but in a normal game, of course, I'm going to be holding them secretly in my hand, but I just want you to see them. So on this worksheet, which we've put in there, the worksheet is meant to be helpful. If you don't like it, just flip it over and use the back. It's blank. You can take notes however you want. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cards and I'm going to take that upper left box called hooky letters and I'm going to cross my cards off. Every card's unique, so if I have these, they cannot be in the hooky pile and they cannot be in anybody's hand. So I'm going to write the names of each of my opponents on there and I'm going to cross them off on their letter boxes too, just to help me track information. Some people, there's over on the left it says opponent letter guesses. That's another place to write your opponent's names. And that's where you should put the letters that they have in their hands. You won't know at the beginning, but you're trying to figure that out. Because if you know which letters everyone has, then you're going to start to know which letters are missing and must be in the hooky pile. People ask about why there's different lengths of boxes. That's just because, like with 3 players, you get 7 cards. So it can change. So it just accommodates the different numbers of players. That's all. Let me tell you what's the main thing that you're going to do on a turn. Okay, you're going to ask a player a 5-letter word. You're going to give them a 5-letter word and spell it, and they're going to give you a number. So that number means how many of the letters they have in their hand, but not which ones. So let me tell you about a pre-round. There's an initial setup round, and I can give you a really good example of this. So before the game starts, I'm going to give information about my hand instead of asking another player something. So I look at my hand of cards and I think of a 5-letter word. It's best, it has to contain at least 1 letter. It can contain more. It's probably not a good idea, but if you think it's strategic, go for it. So I look at my cards and I think of the word fight. So I say it and spell it. Everybody should spell their words. So I say F-I-G-H-T, fight, 1, because I have the F. I don't say that. I just say 1. Then the player next to me goes. We'll call them Ann and Gary and Billy. So Ann now gives a clue about her hand in this pre-round. Something important to know, if I were to give, instead of the word fight, let's say I said swims, S-W-I-M-S. I would have to say 2. I only have the S, but since the S is in the word twice, I have to say 2. And in your player screen, there's a big reminder of this. We use the word daddy that came from James's original rules. So let's say that I have the D, and somebody asked me daddy, D-A-D-D-Y. I don't have the A or the Y, just the D. But I have to say 3 as my answer, and that's right here to remind you. And speaking of reminders, the start player is part of your job, and we'll say that's me. You really should, in the first couple rounds, remind everybody to really double check their answers. Because if somebody says the wrong answer, it could throw off everybody's game. And believe me, it happens. And even when I've made the speech, I've then immediately made the mistake myself. So don't even trust yourself. Double check everything and remind everybody else to do the same. So the initial round is done. We've all got a little bit of information to go on. And now we play the normal part of the game. So let's start with rounds 1, 2, and 3. I'm first. I'm the start player. So now I pick a player and ask about a word. So let's say I pick Ann. And I say clams. C-L-A-M-S. And by the way, everybody at the table is listening, so they're getting information on my turn. So I say clams, and Ann says 1. So we all write that on our sheet. I know a little bit of secret information here. I have the C and the S. So I know that when Ann says 1, she must have either the L or the A or the M. Maybe I make a note of that on my sheet. And this is how you're going to slowly figure out what people have in their hands. So now it's Ann's turn. So she picks a player. Let's say she picks Gary. And she says, Gary, nudge, N-U-D-G-E. And Gary says 0. 0 is actually a really awesome answer because you get a lot of information. The first thing I'm going to do is go to Gary's letter box and I'm going to cross off all those letters. I'm going to look back at words that Gary gave clues about before and maybe learn some new things with that information. And you're trying to figure out, remember, you're trying to figure out what people have in their hands. So if I catch on that Gary has one of these, a certain letter, like let's say I think he has the B, I'm going to write that B over there next to Gary's name. And I'm going to get points for that as well. You cannot pass, so maybe you're clever and you think you've got it all figured out, but you still have to give a 5-letter word to somebody. Just try to pick a word that doesn't give out new information. But you can't repeat a word to the same player, so be careful. I could ask Ann the word angel, A-N-G-E-L. Then on a later turn, I cannot ask angle, A-N-G-L-E, to Ann, because that's asking her about the same 5 letters. If I want, I could ask every single player angel, but I just can't repeat the same 5 letters with the same player. Now, before I tell you a little more about 1, 2, and 3, what happens at the end of those rounds, let's talk about this little yellow guy. Who is this mystery man in the middle of the table? Well, in games where on my turn I'm saying something and somebody else answers on, and they're talking on my turn, and then somebody wants a break and they're taking notes, oftentimes somebody looks up and says, hey, whose turn is it? Well, our little yellow friend is there to help us remember whose turn it is. So once I've finished my turn, I'll put this over here in front of Ann. And when Ann finishes her turn, she'll put it in front of Gary. And that's just to be a helpful reminder. That's all. So what happens at the end of round 1, 2, and 3? Well, I have to do a little bit of my work as start player. So I have this pile of round cards, 1 through 6. So I take the 1 off of there, so that we all can remember we're entering round 2. Then, if there are cards in this playground, which there are, something awesome happens, at least I think so. We reveal one. One of the children comes in from the playground. Here's Bobbin. So now, we leave this on the table. Everybody now knows that B is not in the hooky pile, not in anybody else's hand. And maybe, if depending on what's been asked, you'll be able to learn some things from this. So this card is going to stay revealed on the table. And that will happen after round 2 and round 3, unless you're playing with 3 players, then there's only 2 there. But these cards are going to stay revealed on the table. And that brings me to the reveal rule. After round 1, you have an additional option on your turn. You still have to ask somebody about a 5-letter word, but you can choose to do something additional. So let me take my cards here, and let's say the game's going along and I don't know anything about Gary's hand. So I'm really struggling with that. I can choose to take a card from my hand and reveal it on the table. So let's say somebody asked me swims earlier and I said 2, and I think, well, maybe people know I have the S. So I put it out there. Be careful, because people get points for knowing the cards in your hand, so this could be a free point for everybody. But now I get to do something cool, but a little bit risky. I can pick any player. I'm going to pick Gary, and then Gary has to give me his hand of cards. Let me just grab a few off the screen here. So what I do is Gary's going to give me his hand of cards. I shuffle them, and I peek at one of them. So here I secretly now know that Gary has the letter L. Hopefully I didn't already know that, but if that's new information, it's just for me, and it's maybe going to help me figure out Gary's hand, and nobody else knows it. So it's a really fun rule, and sometimes it's a difficult decision to make. But you can do that every round after round 1. So, what happens when round 4 comes around? Something changes. First of all, there's no more playground cards for sure. At the end of round 4, I've been doing my job. I've been keeping everybody aware of the rounds. At the end of round 4, you must guess at the 3 hooky letters, whether you're ready or not. So there's a space on your sheet right here that says hooky letter guesses. So first guess round, you're going to write the 3 letters that you think are in this hooky pile. Maybe you know them and maybe you're just guessing. But let's say I put A, B, C. So then after round 5, we have to do it again. If I'm confident, I can write A, B, C again. Or maybe I've lost my confidence, or I figured out that Gary has the letter B in definitely my answer was wrong, so I change it up. And I put A, C, or I don't know, I have A, L, Y or something. You can the point is you can change your letters or keep them the same. So at the end of round 6, you're going to have filled in all those guesses, and it's time to score. So let's talk about that. There isn't a score box on here because it's pretty easy to do, so we figured you wouldn't need that. And the information, again, it's in your player screen, and it's on this sheet right here. So here's how it works. For correct hooky letter guesses in round 4, you get 5 points per correct guess. You get 5 points for every correct guess in round 5, and you get 10 points for every correct letter in round 6. Then you go on to the other player's hands. Over here, by now, you should have written which letters you think the other players have. Maybe you know some of them, maybe you guessed at the others. So they're going to reveal everything. And maybe I got 4 of Ann's 5 cards correct, so I get 4 points. Well, I really went after Gary's cards, and I got all 5 correct. So I get 5 points for Gary's cards, and I get 1 bonus point for getting the whole thing right. You get a bonus point for every player whose hand you got completely right. Everybody adds up their score to see who won. If there's a tie, the tied player who got the first hooky card correct wins. If there's still a tie, the player who got the most correct hooky letters earliest wins. And if there's still a tie, the tied player who revealed the fewest cards wins. And that's how you play the game. Before wrapping up, I just want to say a little bit about the spirit of the game. So it's very flexible what words you can use. You can use proper nouns and places and names. I could say Sarah as a clue. I could say Italy as a clue. I can check the spelling of something, but one thing you shouldn't do is research. So let's say I really need to come up with a word for Gary that has a B and an L and a Q, and I'm stuck. I shouldn't go on my phone and research 5-letter words with B, L, and Q. You have to do your own work, just like the students in the school. And that's it. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them below, or you can go over to boardgamegeek.com, where we have a team of people who answer your questions as quickly as possible. I hope you have a great time playing the game. Thanks.